My name is Julia Farwell-Clay. I am a knitting designer and teacher, and this is my favorite and least fiddly way to start working in the round for small circumferences like what you would have in the cuff of a sweater, of a sleeve, or a mitten or a sock. So the first thing I do is patterns will sometimes say to distribute your stitches evenly on DPNs and then join to work in the round. What I prefer is to cast my stitches onto a straight needle or a circular needle that is the same size as the DPNs that I'm going to be working in. And you look at that and you say, well, how do I join to work in the round from there? I don't. What I do is I knit my setup row right off of the straight needles without having to worry about transferring stitches, juggling new needles while I'm working my ribbing for the first time. And it also is very stable. There's no needles hanging in midair while you are moving on to your next set of stitches on your next DPN just to start. There'll be plenty of time for that in just a minute. So here I have worked my setup row. It is a knit 2 purl 2 rib, and I am going to put aside my straight needles, and I'm now going to transfer my setup row onto my DPNs. Having a first row done, I have a much more stable body of knitting at this point. So 24 divided by 8 is, or divided by 3 is 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'm going to move on to here, second needle. And after I have all of these guys transferred, I will be done with my setup. So done with the straight needles. So here are my stitches. They're on their needles to be worked in the round. And some people like to work with 4 needles in the round. For this, I tend to work with 3 because a lot of needles come in sets of 4. I also have to move from one needle to the next as I'm working in the round one last time if I have 3 needles instead of 4. But some patterns, especially when you get into finer gauges and you have a lot more stitches on the needles, it's nice to have 4 needles working on stitches with your 5th needle being your working needle, because there's a certain amount of symmetry involved in the pattern that you're working on, or maybe that as you add thumb stitches it gets to be a little ungainly to have a lot of thumb stitches and the stitches that you're working on your just 3 needles. But anyway, that's for more experience in your future or perhaps even later on in this particular mitten. So here you are, you have these stitches on the needle and you're going to join to work them in the round. Now if your working yarn is, you want your working yarn on the right. Apologies to those of you who are left-handed knitters. But as you join to work in the round, you will find sometimes that you might twist. Now, for the purposes of illustration, I am going to not twist. But in case you get your stitches twisted, don't worry, because you have another opportunity at the end of the round to fix that. But for now, I've joined to work in the round, and I am a scooper, so I'm going to put my yarn there. But if you are a wrapper, and I've gone and joined it, and so my worries are all over. I've now made my join. If you are a wrapper, you're an American style knitter, you might find you can put your working needle into the stitch to start, and then make your stitch, and then your worries are over. I'm going to continue on here. In the way that I knit, which is called combination knitting because I wrap my purls and my knits in different directions from each other. But it makes me a somewhat speedy knitter. I'm not being speedy today because I'm trying to show you something. But I'm going to work around, and I'm going to show you this first round for one reason, because I think of this as being just such a pain-free way of starting a mitten. Least fiddly way I know, as I said. So here you are. Always the concern whenever you join to work in the round is that your stitches are twisted. Now, because you knit a row before you joined, and you have now knit an additional row, you've got 2 rows of rounds of knitting here, and it's a very clear illustration of the direction that your fabric is growing out of. So you can really tell with these 2 rounds whether or not you've twisted your stitches. And in this case I have not, but if you had, there's no reason to worry because you've got one little piece of yarn here. And since you only have one piece of yarn, it's really easy to correct at this point your twists if you've spiraled the stitches around one of these needles somehow. Because if you kept knitting and you twisted, you'd make a Mobius strip, which is not particularly useful when it comes to mittens. Excuse me. A little bit of cold here. So at this point, you're going to continue and you're thinking, well, okay, I've got 2 rounds of knitting, 1 whole row of knitting before I joined. What about that gap? Now that's when this comes in particularly handy. This is your little tail, and that tail you are going to use when you do your weaving in. You're going to do a clever little sort of figure 8 there, or some stitching to close up that gap, and nobody will ever know that it was ever there. And so that is the least fiddly way I know to join to work in the round. Thank you for watching. Like this video if it was helpful. Thank you very much.